I take this virtue and I put it through this framework. On the other end, I have this. We have an obligation as a society to better generation prior. If someone has these tools in advance for that hardship or that hurdle or mountain they have to climb, whatever it may be, then it becomes then a proactive approach to solving what otherwise would be really terrible situation, something that maybe somebody couldn't overcome.
Plus, not really knowing what I wanted to do or be outside of school got me thinking about how the school system could be reframed.
You can teach people how to learn then and in alignment with Transferable Everything through many mechanisms. All right, so this is going to be our first take at basically a parallel journey between writing Transferable Everything and discussing it via podcast. So everybody that is going to watch these videos is joining us on the journey.
Yeah, exposed to the mental work behind the
Yeah. Which, like, before we even get into anything, I have to concede is I knew it would be hard, but is so much harder than I could have imagined. The amount of times I've restarted chapters from scratch or new things have come to mind and I've had to revisit and then reorganize chapters, structure, through lines. That's one of the hardest things is like, you know, you have this idea that you want to bring through all of the chapters and then that changes. And then I have to go through all of them all over again. And
any change you make has a cascading effect, potentially. But I mean, the whole notion of iteration, I think, is central to the thesis anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's why I think having like a living document makes the most sense to me.
Sure.
Because I can continue to iterate. It's how my brain works. Everything I've ever done has been about iteration.
Yeah.
Where this one ends. It's sort of like everything to me has been the infinite game, reference Simon Sinek, and this I'm now playing a finite game.
Right.
Which, you know, the closer I've gotten to completion, the greater that realization has.
Well, as well, when you're writing a book, you're limited in how large that book can be.
Yes.
And there's a whole lot to say here.
Yeah, and
so
I think
you're taking this massive framework of ideas and being like, I have to distill this down into a single digestible piece of media. It's a very tall ask.
It is. I mean, like one of the chapters being grit. Angela Duckworth wrote this long, beautiful book about grit, and that's a single chapter. And you know, the thesis of that book is really what's being argued in each chapter, essentially. Not as beautifully put and researched as Angela's work, but nonetheless, the message is more or less the same. The overall importance of virtues and their value over technical skills. And your attributes and how they contribute to success, and so I think this is going to be a really good opportunity to share some of that journey, share the challenges, and also verbally articulate the ideas. For me personally, I benefit tremendously from speaking about a thing and brainstorming. It's all part of, I think, the iteration process.
Absolutely.
And so I think I'll also personally get value and hopefully everyone listening.
In teasing it out, articulating it in multiple ways.
Yeah.
Different ways of being able to say the same thing and find which one lands the best for the audience.
Precisely. And in addition to that, it gives us an opportunity to collectively brainstorm to then put something actually into writing. So we might even discuss real changes that will show up in the printed version of the book.
Sweet.
Which I think will be really cool. So the idea for today will be to go over the the idea of each of well, okay, so the idea is to review each chapter. So this is going to be one chapter. This chapter is vision, and which is the first chapter in section 2, which is the framework. And we'll discuss the idea behind vision conceptually, the broader thesis, and its application in the framework. Does it make sense? Is it even positionally corrected? So as of right now, it's the first step in the framework.
Right.
Maybe by the time the book is printed, it's third. Who knows? But those are the things that we can discuss, and then we'll actually go into what has been written so far,
Okay.
what works, what doesn't work, what should be added and included, and those will be constructive criticism of what currently exists. Full disclosure, this one is, of all of the chapters, it's, I believe, the newest and has the least amount of work done to it.
Gotcha.
And yeah, so I'm ready to discuss it and then get ripped apart and then collaboratively work on rebuilding it.
Sure.
So so yeah, the idea for vision in the framework is that we first have to create an idea of who we want to be. It's the notion of you don't search for yourself for who you are. You build that person. And so before we build that person, we need to have an idea. We need to create a blueprint of what we want that person to look like.
Right.
Structurally, what are the values that person is going to have? What are the attributes and virtues that they truly embody? And I think I used to talk about this a long time ago when I traveled around talking to schools. And it was sort of the notion of like, who's your hero? Basically identifying that person. What I didn't really realize at the time is I had put like one person. Now, I love Matthew McConaughey's interpretation of this. It's who you can be in 10 years. But even that, how do you structure that person? How do you form the blueprint for that person? And so I think you can look to people, but don't look to one person. Look to many people because we all have flaws. So if you look to one person, then you're gonna, potentially embody both the good that they bring and the flaws that they have. And so if you can meticulously look at a broad group of people, whether it's people you see on social media, on television, hopefully people in your real day-to-day life, friends, family, etc., coaches, teachers, then you can see what are some of the things that they do so well. Okay, I really like this particular thing. This person has a tremendous amount of grit. That's phenomenal. I would love to be that gritty. And maybe they lack something else, and that's okay. Like I said, because we all have our flaws. And then you look to a coach who's a tremendous communicator. I want to be a great communicator. Then you look at one of your parents maybe, and you see like their heart is full of love. I want that as well.
Sure.
And you sort of then create this collection of attributes and virtues that hopefully you can aim towards becoming the best version of all of those things.
Right.
And so that's why vision is the beginning of the framework, because you can't start a journey without knowing where you're going. And so I think that's critically important. And yeah, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah. So there's two things at odds for me with vision being number one. The only reason for that is I believe that you require some foundational level of these virtues or analytical tools in order to see those in somebody else and extract them as a means to be like, okay, I like that. I'm going to pull that into the working vision of who I hope myself to be in 10 years if we're going by that definition, right?
Yeah.
So I do absolutely think it's necessary to go on the journey towards building that person and self-actualizing. But then there is a piece that is resistant to that, which is I don't know whomever's going to get the most value out of this book might not necessarily have that toolbox going into the process to be able to be like, okay, who can I use an example without being controversial? I don't know. So I'll let something else bleed into this, which was how do we not, when looking for a hero or an exemplar, to extract those things from? I also think if we're only seeking the good in those individuals, the virtue, that we almost objectify those individuals into not the sum of their traits, but just the traits themselves. And I think that there's high value from an analytical standpoint to say such and such individual was an exemplar of grit, and they did have these negative things, but how potentially did they leverage their toolbox to not be affected by these negative things?
Right. So that's
There's
a big component.
For sure. So what I had written down prior to was how do we avoid cherry picking traits from others and ignoring the cost of the context behind the individual?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess to caveat this, this portion has kind of required that, to your point, you have some level of analytical skills.
Yes.
Now, out of 100, what's the prerequisite
Sure.
for this to make sense? 20. Yep. I don't know what that number is.
Yeah.
But to your point, when we've had previous discussions, and I've shared a lot of the ideas and intent, the biggest portion of it is to reduce the what's the word? To reduce the barrier of entry.
Yeah.
And so to that point, maybe there needs to be something about analysis that at least
Potentially.
as a chapter, maybe in the first section under level set, let's say. And so maybe if it's currently 20, maybe that chapter helps us bring it down to 15 or 10.
Unless you want to make the decision that you already, like you're writing it for somebody who already has a baseline.
Yeah.
That it kind of makes it easier to write the book
Yeah.
if you make the assumption of, I know my readers are going to be coming from this place. However, the eventual boots on the ground programming and workshopping, there are going to be people who don't have these analytical tools or even the language to talk about it. For instance, like I haven't always necessarily myself thought in terms of like grit or humility, et cetera, et cetera. Those are things that I've picked up over the years, reading intentionally from people who've produced similar works.
Yeah. So I think
I think as well, though, I can see these things exhibited by an exemplar in sport or in business or what have you. There's kind of an unconscious understanding of like, well, yes, they've worked very hard to get where they are.
Yeah.
But you're not necessarily unpacking that into what does work very hard mean.
Sure.
Does it mean they were patient? Does it mean that they exhibited high levels of grit?
Yeah, so I think there's two things there. So in looking at the analysis of somebody else, what led them to that, or that's probably going to be one of the harder components. But if we can accept that the person has it and we would like it, then at least that, I think, gains access to this book being meaningful for that person.
Right.
If they can at least get that in the binary fashion, rather than necessarily analyzing what have they done to build that grit.
Sure.
But that being said, there's still the other point that you made, and I think it's probably worth a chapter in section 1, which, I mean, as of right now, the working title for the section is level setting.
Right.
And so I think it probably, off the top of my head, would be beneficial to be in there. Um, and so I think as well, if we look at that level of analysis, no matter what, we're going to have to make some assumptions
Yep.
that people are able to do it. They're able to at least see the basis of the virtue,
Sure.
especially like ones like grit or work ethic,
Yeah. I think
love, and so forth.
when I come at this from my angle, it's more through the context of speaking about these things with young people.
Absolutely.
So you and I discussed this recently, very, very briefly. I don't think we got into it at all. But the comment I have here is, how does somebody select the right examples to study? In that, especially if in your environment, you actually lack strong mentors,
Yeah.
or you grew up in an area or at a school or what have you, where you think you're looking up to the right people, but you just haven't been exposed to a true exemplar. So the way I'd framed it the other day was like, I looked up to a lot of people when I was very young, but as I started to develop and kind of like reach the same cognitive level as those individuals, they very quickly stopped being exemplars to me.
Sure. I think that sort of goes to the developmental psychology side of like the impact that everyone has around your kids and its significance versus the parents' actual influence themselves. And so I think to that end, I think that's why there's going to be like a continuous evolution of these ideas, both in as we build towards field manuals, which we've discussed, where we can go more niche,
Yeah.
like a parenting field manual, one for younger people in general, but maybe even even a whole book that's sort of the what's the word? Oh, I hate that. I can't think of it right now. Like the prelude,
Sure.
or whatever version of what's the movie? And if you make a movie, fuck.
What, the movie that like, you have a movie and then 10 years later they release one that's like, this
Before
occurred
it.
before the story?
Yeah.
I can't remember what that's called.
It's not a sequel.
The prequel.
Prequel.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right on.
Thanks for I need a young Jamie in here.
Big brain stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe a prequel.
So
Go ahead.
sorry,
Yeah.
in the context of vision,
Yeah.
maybe to get around that or to jump over that hurdle is to speak about how you may cultivate a vision, but that vision is going to have to iterate through like intentional analysis all the time.
Yes.
And I don't necessarily know if that was clear per se.
Yeah. Fair.
So I don't know if that's part of your thinking as well. I mean, ultimately there are going to be environmental influences or contextual influences that they're simply just going to have to change what your vision of yourself is going to be.
Yeah.
I put myself in an athlete's shoes and I blow out my ACL. Like, I'm going to have to revise the vision of who I think I'm going to be, at least for the next 6 months while I heal up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. There's definitely, there's nothing to do with analysis in vision currently, but that kind of brings me to, if I bring that back to traveling around and speaking at schools, part of my presentation that I used to talk about incorporated that. So I talk about, like, broadly speaking, media influence. At the time, this is like 2009 kind of time period, maybe 2010. That's things like music, TV shows, and things like that. And even those, how they influence us. Now, obviously, it's the social media component is even greater, influencers and stuff like that. One of the things that I analyzed about myself growing up and the broader influence was my media consumption. So my parents, for example, specifically my mom, which I give her a lot of credit for, she was very critical about what we could watch and what we couldn't watch. Obviously, at the time, it pissed me off, but I'm super grateful for it. And I look at a lot of the character development in TV shows from what I was exposed to, because I watched a lot of TV shows from really her era.
Yeah.
And the character development had, at least as far as I recall, had so much to do with virtues specifically, especially like the sitcoms.
Yeah.
So much so that a lot of times at the end, it was common practice for like the actors to give a quick 1 minute overview of what was
like
the lesson.
They recap. What did we learn today?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just for kids. It was like an actual one that
Sure.
that everyone would watch, whether it's like Happy Days or something like that. And that I see as a huge miss.
Yeah.
In today's, where there's intention behind it. So then, as a young person, especially boys, we often see ourselves in the main character or a character. And so if that's true, then the person I was often seeing myself as was pretty virtuous. It was really clean television
Right.
back then. I don't want to say flawless, but it's pretty clean. So that's who I would see myself as. And so if you see yourself as that, then that translates into your day-to-day life. You want to be that virtuous sort of character. There was this movie that probably no one has ever seen. It was called The Treehouse Gang. And I watched it so many times growing up, and all of the characters, basically the concept was these young kids, maybe early teens, lived in this small community, and they welcomed somebody in, and they had this little like gang, and their gang was doing good for people around the community. They would help old people or elderly people in the community, and it was all about doing good. And then one of them leaves to go to like a big city, kind of falls in with some wrong crowd, comes back, and he's like an actual gang member at this point. And they hold their values and they try and bring him back in. There's some conflict, and eventually he sees the light and rejoins them. And I always thought that was awesome. Like, that's who I wanted to be. I wanted to be that virtuous person, and so that's who I would see myself as. But if I only saw a lot of the other shows that exist and I saw myself in those characters, that would probably form me in a bit of a different way. Whereas those shows, not that they formed me alone, but it aligned with everything else that my parents were trying to teach me.
Right.
And so there's continuity in what I was consuming from my parents and from the things I was seeing when they weren't around on TV and so forth. So not to take this on a parenting spin, but transferable everything, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, for me, I would be watching like marathons of how it's made on the Discovery Network, and that's why I'm a robot.
Okay, everything is making so much sense.
Yeah, exactly. The values that were instilled into me came from manufacturing documentaries. Just work.
Yeah, that completely
Don't stop.
That completely checks out. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think there's at the very least a chapter or a big component in vision that needs to include analysis. And whether there's a prequel or not that gets into all of that as a precursor to this, to lower that barrier of entry to the avatar that this book is meant for.
Yeah.
All of the companion work that will be done, be it keynotes, seminars, and things like that, will have to sort of articulate the level of what's required in things like analysis before you step in. Like, you should be able to have the ability to analyze your peers and people at a distance to X level, and then at least it's transparent. So if somebody's attending or
Yeah.
whatever, they understand that they need X in order to walk into the room and have a fundamental understanding of everything else that's being discussed.
Yeah. You've got me thinking about vision as not being a singular thing, even when it's iterative. In that you can have multiple visions or have a nuanced vision of who that individual is.
Explain.
So, I think you kind of have to approach it this way. So, it'll change context to context. I think if I'm James, the 15-year-old high school student who plays basketball, which is not going to be the case ever because I am 5'8", but I want to be a basketball player. That in itself has like a singular vision component. That's like something I want to strive towards.
Sure.
But within that, there's like a tiered system going on with the virtues itself.
Right.
In that, okay, so I've made it there. I'm this guy in this vision. How do I respond to a win? How do I respond to a loss?
Yes.
How do I treat my teammates? How do I treat the media? Like there's a vision of who I want to be as the human being outside of the context I place myself within in that broader ecosystem of myself vision. So maybe that's worth exploring.
Well, I think so that's absolutely the intention is once you create that vision, just like values, the virtues of who you want to be are akin to your values, where they become your compass on this long journey. And so to your point, if just like your values, if you say my vision is to be a kind person.
Yeah.
And, towards the end of the book, there will be like, there's an analysis portion at that time where it's basically, am I being those things? So I think I have that chapter called alignment, right? And so it'll be like, okay, well, I want to be a kind person.
Right.
And are my actions day to day in alignment with that virtue as basically an extension of the values? Because we talk about that in terms of values, is that's your compass as you're walking through a dark forest you create the aim, but it's hard to see where you're going. And so how does a kind person respond to their teammates,
Right.
to a ref that's made a terrible call,
Sure.
to the media and all of that kind of stuff? And so, that athletic comparison is a good one for me. I feel like in many cases, especially as I was older, really great at being kind to my teammates.
Right.
Almost never kind to referees. And so, obviously there's the emotional component, but upon reflection after those instances, it's like, okay, well, I didn't live up to the expectation of myself of being a kind person.
Right.
And, recognizing that I wanted to be a passionate person, and part of that component is to be a deeply passionate person. Sometimes the downsides of that version that I'm utilizing on the field bleeds into another version.
Sure.
And so you give yourself a little bit of grace, but recognizing that there's a misalignment at the same time.
So one of the things I did want to clarify with you, and it goes into some of the bits in the chapter, but more specifically on vision itself. When you're talking about vision, particularly in the context of the whole framework, do you see it as being, and it goes to like my multi-tiered suggestion, which is it a moral vision? Is it practical vision? Or is it aspirational? Like how do you tease that out within the framework? When you say build the vision of who you want to be in the like the practice of this this chapter, are you only asking the individual to envision which of these virtues they feel that they want to embody or build within themselves, or are you asking them to form the nuanced full picture vision?
The full picture vision. So one of the things we've briefly discussed, I'm trying to figure out how to fit it into the book. But part of my vision for Transferable Everything is this pulls from your robot, you being a robot kind of thing. But if in our analysis of ourselves, if we look at this this bar graph working left to right, the attributes and virtues that would be representative on this bar chart, 0 to 100, there's so many more than we have listed here.
Sure. It's a monstrous continuum.
Yeah, it's almost infinite, right? We've just extracted some of them, but if you looked at those, if you've never embodied any of those, then you're at 0.
Sure.
And you could, if you realize you're at 0 for one of those, you could quickly embody it, and now it's at, say, 1. So in that self-analysis, I guess this is kind of bringing your point, and this would probably be a way to bring that bar graph in thinking about it now.
Yeah.
Is to kind of figure out where you're at
Yeah.
in each of these areas, and what we're aiming for is improvement.
Yeah.
Right. And so, if my grit is currently at 60, I want to get it to 80. It could be for a reason, something I'm aiming towards. I want to be a firefighter, and I know you need to have a high level of grit.
Sure.
So I might not aim for it simply because I want 80 on this scorecard of the virtues, your attributes, but I know I need it, and so I'm going to intentionally pursue it. Conversely, maybe during my time in the military, I was at 80, and once I left and became a civilian, maybe it dropped down to 60. So it can go both ways. They take practice and they take intentionality. So I guess that's one of the biggest, that's probably the first premise actually, is that it's a moving scale, and with intention, you can increase it.
Sure.
But it can also atrophy and decrease. If you're not practicing any of these things, especially with intention, then it might atrophy. And you might be able to 2x the increase with intention. So a lot of these attributes are developed kind of as a byproduct of something else you're doing.
Yeah.
And so it's a slow moving increase. However, if you add intentionality to it, that might be the one factor that gets you to the level that you want, or it just puts rocket fuel underneath.
Right.
I don't know if that answers that question exactly, but I'm glad you brought me to that.
Yeah, no, I think ultimately where I was coming from is that I think part of the value individuals will get out of this is that they don't necessarily have the language or the ability to articulate their own virtues, how they've come to the level on that bar graph that they found themselves. And going back to our exemplars or our heroes, role models, and so forth, there's also an assumption that even though they've met this high level of being able to embody this thing, that they can articulate it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because very often there are people who misattribute something to their reason for success. And
yeah,
for young people and old people, it's unless you have the language, you might not be able to see through the bullshit.
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head. The language is a really important part of that. And even if you have the language, and even if you have some of the understanding, there's also the idea of can you actually be objective and problem solve
Yeah.
through everything to identify what the issue is, even at that. So it's a really challenging thing to do. And the point of misattributing, that's like that one component is perfectly summed up in Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, where I don't think anyone considered luck's role truly based on when you're born, let's say, in how that contributed to your success. And so, like all things, it's often many things, not one thing.
Yep.
But usually the story we tell ourselves and others is this one thing. I worked this hard. I was this smart, whatever the case may be. And that was the key that unlocked that door. And it's, I could probably say definitively never that thing.
Well, I mean, to jump in just briefly, you have a scenario where you have an incredibly gifted physical specimen of an athlete who believes that they got to where they did by being the hardest possible worker, which they may very well have worked very hard, but if there's somebody else who doesn't have the same, like, say, genetic gifts, in a similar level in whatever sport or discipline, the person who is extremely physically gifted can't even appreciate the level of work that other person had to put in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I experienced that myself, and I guess this is kind of the value of sharing some personal stories throughout the book, is I would say that even still looking in retrospect, my commitment and desire to become a professional soccer player, I put everything into it. I made every sacrifice I could possibly make, and dedication to that dream, and still didn't succeed. Oftentimes what was reported back to me from coaching staff and scouts was my technical ability, well, that's a controllable on my end, was at a professional level.
Right.
Or maybe even exceeding, say, something like passing or distribution, which was a strength in my game. And I could see that when I played at those levels. But my height, my stature was a limiting factor, being on a good day 5'7", and so that became feedback that I received. And not to say that no one's ever made it at 5'7", but the odds decrease exponentially as you get shorter and shorter below 6 feet, let's say.
Yeah.
And so, to that end, there's controllables, uncontrollables.
Yeah, I guess my point just was, if let's say there's a sprinter and he's my idol.
Yeah.
But he's just built in a way where maybe he only needed 2 training days a week to get to a level where somebody else had to train every day with certain kinds of periodization, very specific supplement protocol. That's not to say the other guy isn't doing that as well, but maybe physical gifts allowed them to think maybe they were working harder than they actually were to get to the level they're at.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and that's, to be fair, I don't think that devalues their role as a role model, because if they attribute their success to hard work, people are going to look to that and say, oh, okay, well then surely there's value in hard work. If they see it that way, maybe it still is that way, and so it's a matter of perception.
Yeah.
But that's a bit of a rabbit hole.
Yeah, that goes to the Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson truth rabbit hole. But I think that's right, because, I mean, it's in the book as well, but it's true that all we can do is focus on the things that are within our control. And so if you're a professional athlete and you attribute your success to the things that are within your control, and that's going to inspire someone else to model those things, embody those things, and focus on the things within their control, then that's exactly the outcome we want. If you say something like, yeah, I'm successful because of my height and I worked really hard.
Right.
Someone like me is gonna be like, okay, so I can work really hard, but that's only 50% of the equation. So there's no point.
Right.
And then I'm then robbed of the potential, because there is a potential. Not zero,
Sure.
right? Um, so it's the potential, and the whole point of transferable everything being the journey, not the outcome anyways.
Sure.
Not to say that maybe working this hard, I might have been better served to have chosen gymnastics when I had the choice between gymnastics and soccer, or maybe I should have been like a horse jockey or something. But if it was something a little more tailored to my height, and I applied my work ethic, that served me so well.
The best jockey of all time.
That's right. Yeah, I would have killed that shit.
Yeah, I guess I think where that maybe comes from for me is that I value honesty and transparency so much, is that if I'm looking up to somebody as an example, I personally would look to somebody who has those qualities.
Sure.
So, it's incredibly disappointing to me when, for instance, a weightlifter or a UFC fighter pops for steroids.
Right.
I'm like, you've completely torched your genuine persona.
Yeah.
Any role model potential you had is just like peppered with hypocrisy now.
Sure.
And I guess that goes into the whole choosing your role models, which is, even if you think you've chosen the right one, you can still be disappointed by the human element, which is why I think just looking for the virtue they do have instead of taking the sum of the parts into account can be a little problematic.
Yeah.
But it's important for the exercise of cultivating
Yes.
who you want to be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's like some pragmatism that needs to be applied, right? Like if we look at evolution through this lens as well, this is my first time really articulating this, but if we think of the iPhone, for example, right? There's evolutions. It's the iteration, right? Yeah. And we're a step in human evolution as well. And so our job is to be better than our predecessors, our parents, or whoever that hero is. So if you pick an athlete that's been popped for steroids, and that's been a letdown, they likely still have a ton of great virtues,
Sure,
and attributes that they bring to the table. That highlights one that they may struggle with, but it's also one that maybe they struggled with for a chapter of their life, and that same version of themselves at 45 retired has kind of resolved in their honesty and integrity portion. And I think that's where like grace, this gets into a later chapter, failure and forgiveness, because we'll all be hypocrites of ourselves anyways, because we're going to continuously fall short of our aim. And I think it's a lot easier once you're in the public persona. And so I mean,
you need to be so perfect
as
a public persona.
Yeah, and I think society, this is going to derail a little bit, but like, it's something that we've lost generally in society, is like grace and forgiveness, I think. And so then I think a lot of us struggle with it within ourselves as well. It's something I struggle with, and that's one of the reasons why I knew it was so important. I'm trying to hold such a high standard for myself that every time I fall short, it's so easy to self-deprecate. Yeah. So I create this vision for myself, and then I do my analysis, and I know I've fallen short of that day to day, week to week, and I'm not there. And so, but that can't be like a limiting factor that pulls you from the continued pursuit and improvement. That being said, if I look at myself 2 years ago, it's still an incredible improvement. Sure. So if you only look at that piece, then you lose all of the other gains anyways. Right. So it's a combination of all of those things. So
yeah, you're chasing multiple goals at one time. That's right. You got to accept the wins that you've already won.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the game in many ways of self-actualization and improvement is recognizing that you're going to make improvements in certain areas, you're going to fall short in others. How do you pick yourself up genuinely? Not in the current way it's being described that I see all over social media. It's the genuine pick yourself up and re-aim towards that thing. Not just say, well, yeah, you're having a tough go these days, so it's not a big deal kind of thing. Like there's this weird balance where, you have to be critical enough, but not to a detriment. And it's a hard balance to strike, I think.
Sure.
One that I definitely fall short of, and, maybe not too far left or right, but trying to just walk that line is a hard one. And that's where language comes in. That's where self-talk comes in. And
Sure.
And those sorts of things, which is all maybe things that need to be in the prequel now that we have that word.
Yes.
Something struck me because as we're sitting here, no one really knows this yet, but we're in the turf side, the athletic side of what will become TE Studio.
Right.
And this will be moved into the podcast section once that's built. But basically right now we're just in this large, pretty much now empty warehouse.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Sierra, and we heard a lot of comments today, and maybe you can speak to this too, but a lot of people are now saying, oh, I can see it now. And what I realized was, before any of the construction even started, before anything, I was speaking with architects.
Right.
And I created a vision for it. I asked them to turn that into a blueprint on my behalf. And so, it's nice to see, but it's not a shock. This is what I saw. And so maybe to some degree, vision in particular, more broadly, is something that I maybe take for granted a little bit more personally.
Perhaps.
Because it comes natural to me. And that makes it a little bit harder to write about. Because it's this weird, obviously it's an intangible, and so anyways, I thought I'd just kind of table that.
There are two things there, I think. One of them is a nice physical metaphor, which is that there's a lot of memory in this place for the people who've been walking around and looking at it saying, well, I can't really see the vision, because they know, or they have preconceived architecture built around the space physically.
Yeah.
So if we pull that into the mental sphere, oftentimes your vision of who you could be is crowded or obscured by the pre-existing notions of what you've got going.
Been.
Correct.
Yes.
Right. Now there's that which we can unpack. And then the other half is considering that vision can be a difficult thing to articulate.
Yeah.
So, I feel like I have ideas about things all the time, but I speak in roundabout ways or over-explain. So, actually articulating what my vision, and to be fair, even the ham story that I told.
So glad you brought that up.
Yeah, the ham story we spoke about 2 hours ago is my concepts aren't always going to land because of how I've articulated them, or because of how other people maybe view or extract things themselves. If you're not looking for more, you're not going to find more. Yeah, sure.
I'm so glad you brought up that ham story, because this is going to be a...
Yeah, it's an expose.
Yeah.
You're going to see me in jail in a couple weeks.
Oh, God, I hope not. This book is never going to be written.
Yeah. Same, but it's because I don't like being solitary.
I think there's actually something there that it made me think of. I have an idea for all of your craziness, but I won't get trapped into that loophole. So,
Yes.
Sierra, make sure I don't forget to tell James my idea for the ham story. However, without explaining the whole ham story, what it broadly is call it a 2-minute idea for a play. Obviously, you can expand on it, but let's say for the sake of it, 2 minutes. And from that there's so many things. It became this broader metaphor for the thing. And effectively, that's the other part of transferable everything. So there's really two premises that we're building inside of here. It's the transferability of the virtues, their importance, of course, in terms of them versus technical skills, but it's also the transferability of lessons.
Right.
So there's really two things that are intended to really live within the book. And that's one of the other challenges, if I go back to the beginning of this, is trying to put two concepts in there. I think it's important to. I'm kind of stuck on that. But in this Ham story, it's this very basic scene that you've created, but it's not actually basic. There's so many layers and complexities you've built into this screenwrite.
Sure.
If that's the right word to call it, but you've done it in a brilliant way. What I realized is that so many things that happen continuously in my life, I look at in that same way. I'm looking at the depth and the layers of each scenario.
Now, do you think that you take your capacity for domain transfer for granted?
Absolutely. That's why it's taken me 15 years to get to a place where I feel now I can put it on paper, but I didn't even have language for it.
Sure.
I came up with the name Transferable Everything 15 years ago, and I lived my life very, very much in alignment with the thesis, some by choice and some by happenstance. But I absolutely take it for granted, which is also what makes it harder to extract it.
Right.
Which is also why I've had this recognition where it's important for me to get help with that, because it's so close,
right,
to not just my heart, but me, who Daniel is, and so. Amongst a bajillion other reasons, hence
sure,
Mr. Keating sitting across from me and us discussing this.
Right. Well, because I'll bring it back to the visual metaphor of the ham, which is that if it were to be produced, I'm literally force feeding my audience the thesis.
Yeah.
In the context of what's being shown on stage.
Right.
And yet, different people are going to have a different takeaway. Sure. Unless they have potentially, and maybe I'm blowing air out of my ass, but a high level or high capacity for domain transfer in that they can see all of the various things unpacked in one visual metaphor.
Sure.
Because context and approach, maybe I have a very narrow life, no breadth of experience, and I just going to go and I sit down and I watch it and I'm going to go, all right. Where experience is going to inform what you get out of it. And I think in a way I also take my capacity for domain transfer for granted as well.
Sure. And I think that's what's kind of brought me to this space of seeing transferable everything as something really expansive. I'm much probably blowing smoke out of my own ass now too, but I see it as genuinely transformative because I think so many people have these skills, but there's significantly more that don't. And from everything I've seen, this is like, if you look at success, this is in every area, this is fundamental to success. So, for example, it's referenced in the book as well, Jocko Willink's Dichotomy of Leadership. His book is him articulating transferable everything in practice.
Right.
Same with Eric Davis's Raising Men. 2 SEAL teams guys respectfully, one taking SEAL team lessons and transferring them to business, one taking them and transferring them to parenting. So they've done that, and what I wanted to do is put language to the act of doing that, and seen as something so important and critical to success. Then the question became, well, how can you teach it? How can you share that skill set with the world? And I hadn't found any language surrounding that actual thing, and so it's taken a long time to try and create a language around it.
Yeah, it's almost effectively a field manual for domain transfer.
Exactly.
For those who don't innately have it, here's how you can teach it.
And that's why I've gone back and forth in this book so much, is because I didn't want to just talk about it conceptually or philosophically, which was kind of where it did begin, to be totally fair.
Yeah.
I knew that it needed to become more of a framework, which is, in all honesty, how my brain works as well. So what I want is for people to take from it something where you can say, okay, if I take this lesson or I take this virtue and I put it through this framework, on the other end, I have this.
Right.
And so section 2, the largest section, is that framework that, so far at least, I've been able to distill it down to, is that if you push a lesson through that, on the other end comes this thing. So said differently, if you were to take Dichotomy of Leadership, you put that experience that Jocko shares through this,
right,
on the other end in business, you now have this. And so trying to share that with the world, really, because for me, it's been critical, not just to success, but survival, mentally and physically, to overcome terrible injuries, to move on from terrible tragedies, and still be, a high functioning person that's still aiming and moving forward. And in a world where so many people are struggling, unfortunately, with so many of those things, it also then became what I hope could be a part solution to solving that. And I also see it as, if someone has these tools in advance for that hardship or that hurdle or mountain they have to climb, whatever it may be, then it becomes then a proactive approach to solving what otherwise would be a really terrible situation, something that maybe somebody couldn't overcome, and it derails their life potentially, or something. So, in most cases, I'm a fan of proactive measures, especially in character development and building virtues and things like that. So, hopefully we can accomplish that. It's a tall ask and a tall order, but.
Is there anything else that you want to cover before we dive into the meat and potatoes here?
No, rip me apart. I'm ready.
Okay. So, like I mentioned, I have some section by section notes, which I had to turn into something a little more thoughtful, because I approached it maybe not in a fair way with how hard I went. So I had to dial back.
That's okay.
Because I appreciate that this isn't a finished chapter.
Yeah.
In the same way as the other ones are.
Yeah.
So what I want to start with first is the concept and the argument of the chapter, broadly speaking.
Okay.
There are 3 things you discuss within the chapter that I feel has a good deal of overlap. And for me, that makes things feel a bit muddy.
Okay.
In that you cover vision, visualization, and self-actualization all in a 3-page chapter. And
Yeah.
I don't feel that you've given any of the 3 enough justice or enough due.
Sure, that's fair.
To really get to the point of what you're trying to say. It was unclear to me what was intended to be the focus of the chapter with those 3 things. So which one are we assigning the most importance to. And based on what we just spoke, that's intended to be vision.
Yeah.
So just in terms of a hierarchy of importance, there needs to be way more content about vision generally.
Sure.
And we can use the other things as tools or things to aspire towards that augment the meaning of vision and how it applies to the rest of the framework. To be fair, and I mentioned this yesterday, I think visualization alone could have its own chapter if you felt it was necessary.
Yeah.
If you don't think it's necessary, I think you can include way more about visualization within vision as well if you frame it as a tool to develop that vision.
Sure.
I just feel it deserves more room.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that was my only comment about concept and argument. There needs to be much more clarity. And we can rip through top to bottom as well if you want to go into that a little more. There were a number of things that I just didn't like.
Hit me.
So starting from the very top, I don't like the quote. Can you tell me why you chose that? There's a couple comments about the quote.
Sure.
But, I'll leave that question first.
Yeah. So I had a vision for the book that I wanted to begin each chapter with a quote. I wanted to focus on sort of a stoic quote, because I think there's a lot in Nothing New as within that chapter, that there's overlap with a lot of stoic principles and other components. But I just thought, stoicism has taught me quite a bit, and so it was sort of a nod.
Do you want to share the quote with the listeners, and then I can tell you why I don't like this one in particular?
Yeah. So the quote is, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do.
So
Epictetus.
In principle,
yes,
I like it.
Okay.
I personally feel that it would fit better as a closer to a chapter than an opener. The reason why is because it has much more gravity once they understand the process of building the vision. I think when it's the opener to the chapter, if the reader sees that and they could simply just decide who they were and how to get there, then they wouldn't need the book.
An oversimplification.
That's all.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense to me. I like that.
I think as a closer, the gravity of it hits much, much harder once they've experienced everything you have to say in the chapter.
Yeah.
But as an opener, you kind of see it and you're like, oh, I'm a little disarmed. It's an easy thing. I might not even need to read the chapter.
Sure.
Who do I want to be? And I'll do it.
Yeah.
It's that easy.
Sure.
My other comment was, it's to your point about opening every chapter with a quote. Conceptually, I do like it in how it fits on a philosophical level.
Yep.
My criticism is, sure, there is nothing new. This is built on a foundation of many, many things. But you also need to take ownership of your ideas. And you devalue yourself every time you open a chapter by appealing to an authority.
Yeah.
Quote yourself.
Oh. Yeah. That's...
There's a duality, right? Because stylistically, I think it's a cool idea. But I also know that you have a lot to say. And when I read it critically, every time I see that, I go, okay, here we go. He's found somebody else with the idea, and he's going to put the weight or the gravity of the words behind that person and not himself.
Yeah, so this is going to become a personal coaching session, I think. So the thing that I struggle with is Transferable Everything is my idea. It's, like I said a couple minutes ago, it's something that I've not found language for. And still, as I've done research, despite me putting a chapter in called Nothing New, the Transferable Everything in its totality, I still haven't found anything that anyone else has done that is Transferable Everything. However, because I see Transferable Everything as piecing together things someone else has created or claimed, identified, then I've just seen myself simply as the person that saw this pattern and pulled it all together. Now, if I was critical of that, that's to say that a something that's newly created physically is just an accumulation of something someone else has created and you've put it together and manufactured it as one. And so we see that as its own separate thing, and I'm not giving myself that same thing. I don't mind carrying the weight of the idea.
Sure.
It's
But there's a level of like, this gives me or my words a little more credibility when I say this person has also thought this. Like
so I don't even see it as that.
It's not baseless.
I don't even see it as that personally, because for the most part, I've never really been a person that that cares about authority in any way. I only care about the idea. I don't really appeal to authority. Maybe sometimes to a fault, I'm sure.
Because in this chapter, you've name dropped 3 people without really providing like a breadth of information about them. You've just said such and such person talked about this. Therefore, you go into your thing.
Yeah, and I think so. I have no problem taking the weight of the total idea, but because each chapter is a piece, that each piece isn't my idea, the collective is.
Yeah, which is fair. I feel like maybe if you're gonna go to the lengths to include ideas from other people, there needs to be more of it.
Okay. And
it could be that this one is just it's an outlier from the rest of the chapters because I haven't read everything in its totality.
Yeah.
In this particular case, it just seems like it was thrown in there for the sake of being like, just check them out if you don't understand what I'm saying.
Got you. So, I mean, that's, of course, probably going to be a part of it's just sort of overall incomplete nature. But I think that criticism is fair because that's something that I've been struggling to reconcile in chapters that I have finished anyways.
Right.
Which is I'm trying to be so careful as to not claim anything.
And that's fair.
For myself.
But I mean, who said anything the first time?
Yeah. And
everything is really just an iteration of something, and you've put in your experience as the frame or the lens or the filter through which those things are expressed.
Yeah.
You obviously don't bastardize the idea. Maybe even challenge it if you think your spin is different or better or more complete. You're iterating upon an existing vision in addition to yours in creating this.
Yeah. And, I think...
You can't outright be like, yeah, I actually coined the term, I think, therefore I am, for example.
Sure.
Yeah, cogito ergo sum is purely my idea.
Yeah.
And I don't think you've done that in any place. But it wouldn't be wrong to say, I've applied this.
Right. And, I think that's where, if I take this back to one of bajillion reasons why I felt critical to bring you in, amongst the most important parts of it, which is, we'll have to get the roll-up door for your head to get out of here, but for you being the person that you are, and the level of analysis and intelligence and the virtues that you embody, and your willingness to be very direct, of course, that that's going to help that's going to help overcome that's going to help me overcome these challenges within the writing sphere.
Sure.
Because I give you a great deal of trust. So when you say, hey, you're not being like that, that helps quiet my self-critical voice. I think, and that's where like self-criticism is good. It protects you from a thing because I don't want to be this. And so then I'm hyper cognizant of whether I'm being close to that on the scale. But to have somebody else be like, no, you're not being like that at all. That's not what's represented here. And you deeply trust their ability to be, not just be direct, but actually intellectualize what's on paper.
Sure.
So I, in saying that now, I could probably go back to this and do a rewrite with a lot more confidence, and knowing that if I start to lean that way in my writing, that you're gonna be like, no, this is...
All knowledge is borrowed or inspired. It's you've taken it, embodied it in a way, and you have changed it just by virtue of your essence having touched it. You can explore these ideas with confidence and articulate them through your experience. Doesn't mean you've stolen anything or that you're taking credit for any of it. It's just all a matter of how you express those things. You can absolutely make reference to other people because they have been strong influences and helped you think a certain way.
Sure.
But they're not the only reason why you're writing about these things.
Yes.
You would have thought them or found them elsewhere because of the vision that you've built for yourself.
Absolutely. And that's totally fair. And I think maybe probably improving on the nothing new chapter, or like taking that and adding into that chapter, which is effectively, in essence, a bit of a caveat chapter. Instead of having like a sentence caveat, it's a whole chapter that's a caveat. But in fairness to myself, it is something that has been like a really eye-opening.
It's also a very interesting thing to think about. Just knowledge, generally speaking. I don't know how often people think about the conditions of consciousness and how it's been influenced by thousands of years of other thinkers.
Yeah, and I mean, so to your point, if I don't include a reference, or I don't go into depth of someone who's thought through this thing before, I'm not doing so from a place of audacity. And there's a genuine understanding that most of these things have come before me.
Sure.
That being said, maybe I'm just so hyper aware because I do see more broadly in public thinkers that there is an audacity and a lack of humility around their ideas. And so like I'm maybe just afraid to be seen in the way that I'm seeing them, and not wanting to be seen that way. That being said, that's also not a good way to go through life, is to be afraid of being seen as the thing that, not that I hate, but that I dislike. But as long as I know in my heart that I'm genuinely not that, then that should otherwise suffice, if you will. And to the point of nothing new, it's just simply that I see so many public thinkers, deep thinkers, constantly talking about ideas as if they're entirely their own, and maybe just not providing enough nods to the history behind them, where they've come from. It's
but there is an essence, I think, and this is going to sound a little woo woo, but it like
from James. That's good.
Yeah. It goes like it's in the realm of knowledge, in that like the first time you come to an idea or really understand it, where you have that light bulb moment, even if somebody's already thought it before, if it's been written about, like the moment you truly conceive of it or understand it, you like feel the essence of it.
Yeah.
And you feel like part of yourself imprinted onto that essence.
Sure.
In a way.
Yeah.
it feels so important to you that you can't help but share it with somebody else. Like people need to know this. This is going to change them. I want them or need them to feel the way that just made me feel, because I know the power of this thing. That's
Totally.
uniquely yours.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't necessarily give you license to take credit for an idea.
Sure.
But you can appreciate that you've deeply felt it. You know the truth behind it.
Yeah.
It's informed experience. It continues to. It's like a light bulb that forced you to change that vision or the trajectory.
Yeah.
That's uniquely yours. You're free to speak to that for sure.
Sure. And to be fair too, like I know that, you know, you're free to speak about it. And maybe it's me trying to solve more things inside of this book than I should be focused on. So like, in addition to Nothing New being a caveat, it's also like I had thought about Nothing New as its own book, to be totally fair, which is like literally going through modern day revelations, if you will, and the actual historical part of it, of, you know, dating it back to maybe not its inception, but
So
somewhere.
is that the notion behind the quotes? Every time you include a quote, it's a nod to the Nothing New?
In a way, yeah.
Are you asking the reader to be like, hey, have you heard of this guy before? Or are you suggesting that, hey, like, this is additional suggested reading for this chapter. Check out this individual's works? Or is it just a nod?
I think it's just a nod.
Yeah.
A nod and an appreciation for myself and like the stoicism, what it's sort of contributed to my learning. And
Yeah, so I would urge you to think about each of these Stoics individually on like a time frame standpoint. Maybe look, did somebody 200 years before this Stoic have the same idea? Are they just espousing the same thing a different way?
right.
But we give them the ivory tower because they said it 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. That's kind of what I was getting at for the Nothing New. If it was a book, you know, I would struggle with the idea of, do you need to date it back to its inception? Can we even do that historically?
Right.
Whereas I think more what I want to achieve is to say this new revelation that we have in psychology about gratitude journaling. This isn't new.
Right.
And maybe multiple areas where this has existed historically, you know, calling the Stoics and Marcus Aurelius' memoirs, which is effectively that.
Sure.
Jesus, prayer, or prayer even from ancient Judaism, pre-Jesus.
Sure.
You know, whatever the thing is, we've known about this, and really the not to derail from vision too far, but really the underlying component to that is what I said previously, is about evolution. It feels like, to me, like we're not evolving on these things enough. We're rediscovering ancient lessons.
Sure. Well,
and
I
it
mean,
boggles my mind.
historically, there have been many periods of regression as well, though. Like if we take the Dark Ages, for instance,
Totally.
There's long periods of stagnation and then forgotten knowledge and resurgence. And, you know, like this probably falls within that same lane.
Yeah.
On an individual level, if you haven't learned it, you're in a moral dark age or a virtuous dark age, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
It's just a resurgence.
Sure.
If they're not getting it somewhere, they can get it here.
Yes. Well, I guess the question is, like, do those things need to exist, and what can we do different? So I guess that kind of goes to also a bit of my premise or thesis about seeing the world as our classroom. And it's not explicit in here, so in the book, because I wanted to be careful as to not to criticize
Sure.
the the broader schooling system. But on the mics, I can articulate it better, and I don't mind a little bit more to be critical. Is and I'm saying this as a person who just cares about society. Is I can't imagine a world where a whole class on just learning geography, what country is what their capital of that country is, and their states or provinces, who the current president or prime minister of that country is of any value in contrast to learning about something like this, or even if you wanted to just frame it with like teach stoicism, or and so my only critical component is we have an obligation as a society to better the generation prior, and through education, learning, and so forth. And so I think that learning about character development and virtues and self-actualization would go so much further. And maybe then we don't have to go into dark ages. Maybe then we don't have to lose lessons from the past and historical lessons. It's just like being a lot more critical of like, okay, where are we today? Okay, it'd be really helpful that we learn these things and these things. If someone's 20 years old and they don't know the capital of the US, like Sierra, then
you're effectively seeking a means for the collective to change the social contract.
Yeah.
If we're to look at your geography versus foundational principles example, I was just thinking, like, between the two, which one is learning to run before you learn how to walk? So we have for whatever you could say the needs of society are for everybody to have capacities in geography. I don't know where that falls in, but whether it's like geopolitics, or some would consider that foundational knowledge that a human being simply requires to exist in society. But really, the things that we need for people to live well and treat each other well are to focus on the more foundational things.
Yeah.
I just, from an educational standpoint and no experience within that world, do we need one before we can grasp the other? Is one more difficult to embody and understand? Are they complementary? These are open questions. I don't necessarily need to go into them. It's just what came across my mind. I think in the interest of time, we could probably bypass that unless you want to jump into it.
I have to answer it,
All right.
just because I'm so passionate about it. I'm sorry. I mean, okay, so I spoke to a lot of people that have worked in the educational system, and what they would say to me in response to that criticism is, through those courses, we're teaching people how to learn.
Right.
Okay, well, now you're blowing smoke up my ass, because you can teach people how to learn then, and in alignment with Transferable Everything, through many mechanisms. So why don't we select the mechanism that will give the most value, and in addition to that, teach them how to learn? But if you want somebody to learn and to help them learn and to think critically, Stoicism is a great place to start.
Sure.
Right? If you just have like a class each year and you build on it and you teach what is the Socratic method, why is it important, and that's demonstrated, within the classroom setting, and maybe that gets to be the only class that isn't tested on anything, and it's simply about fostering curiosity and a thirst for knowledge. One class, that's it. Replace geography. I don't care, because there's probably no class in there that I would think is a necessity, even in technical skills, especially as we move into the AI world. Yeah. But I think, first principles thinking, if you can have that and build on that and foster through that, selfishly take Transferable Everything. That can turn into a curriculum peace within the school system or stoicism or whatever. But I think that would change everything. And because it's historical, it means it's the one thing you don't have to continuously go back to the drawing board on.
Right.
Because it's been a universal truth since how far, it doesn't matter how far you want to look back to, Marcus Aurelius's memoirs if you want. And it's continued to be true to today. And so, sweet, you don't have to continue to revisit that. Well, you might have to continue to revisit other subjects.
Right.
But in any case.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with our friend Stefano yesterday on the drive into work. And we were talking about, it was parent-teacher night for him and his kids.
Yeah.
And he was just talking about some of the strengths that his daughters have, and I started reflecting about like my school experience.
Yeah.
And I stopped taking math in grade 11 because I only had to take it up until that point.
Right.
Never really liked mathematics, and for a number of reasons, but at the time I didn't really frame it as problem solving. Problem solving is something I love to do.
Yeah.
But when it comes to learning math in school, find X. Why do I care?
Yeah.
There was not enough gravity behind it, or it just didn't seem interesting. That, plus not really knowing what I wanted to do or be outside of school, got me thinking about how the school system could be reframed and maybe why it's set up the way it's set up. And for a number of reasons. The other piece there is that we teach all of these things because we treat them as foundational.
Right.
Presumably going back to the prevailing order, because in order to have a well-rounded person who's capable of being a factory worker, let's say, needs to have all of those competencies or capacities. As a child, we can't really be like, I think it's an Ayn Rand book. Rush made a concept album based off of it, I think. Regardless, they're assigned their job as children.
Yeah.
And are developed into those people. We can't do that to people.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then like, how do we choose what things are the most important thing to teach them if we want to give developing people access to all of the various pathways that are possible? So like for me, mathematics was never in the cards. But how could anybody have seen that in like a 5-year-old child starting school being like, nah, he doesn't need the math because he's not going to use it?
Yeah. Okay. So you touch on some really good points, and I've had these things thrown at me, and I've had to think about them over the years. So, of course, there are some foundational things.
Yeah.
Basic math, for example, and so forth. But there's a limit to it of where it stops becoming a general utility or foundational for what's next. And so reevaluating where that is, and I don't pretend to know that currently. I would love to be a part of a study that did that, to be fair. And so I think that's certainly part of it. But I think at the very least, there has to be room for what I'm describing to be even a companion course.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not suggesting there isn't.
No, I know. But like, even for a person listening that is being extremely critical of what I'm saying right now, is I'm not saying replace everything. Create a companion one, just as I described. I think critically, like I said, not having test scores in that class, it really being about curiosity. And a lot of people think that, and maybe at the beginning it would be true, and it would take a talented teacher where students would show up and be like, I'm going to take this class easy because who cares? I'm not getting marked on it or whatever. But you also take the pressure away. And if you have a really talented teacher, they could do a lot with that. Where they say, hey, let's just explore some ideas. Let's have a class discussion.
Sure.
About a thing, and there's no pressure on it. You can table anything. There's no stupid questions. It's a philosophy class, really, is what it becomes, but it's just grounded in or based on something in principle. But to the more extreme version of that, of replacing certain classes, there's also the notion of like, we attribute so much knowledge directly to even foundational knowledge to the school system. It's like, I don't know that to be true. To be fair, like my kids learn to walk by watching us. I didn't take their feet and show them one by one. They started to speak, which the leap from nothing to speaking has to be one of the greatest leaps we make.
Sure.
It must, right? So they started to speak without us teaching them, and they continue to evolve more by watching. Just like I was saying earlier, in terms of language, it's not like he's learning about words, consonants, and vowels, but in another world, let's say in another system, they could still learn all the same foundational knowledge without the rigors and design that we've currently placed. And I think there are examples of that, especially in like new age schools and homeschooling environments and things like that.
The only thing I would counter with is it's the same thing as writing this book and putting it on shelves, which is accessibility.
Yes.
I can't necessarily attribute my base of knowledge to the school system, but I was exposed to a heck of a lot of things because of it that I might not otherwise have been exposed to.
Right.
So whether or not I have trust or faith in the system that it was designed optimally, and I don't think it is. And there are a lot of things that, you could call it their duty to have built within me foundationally that I was just unreceptive to, like mathematics, for example.
Sure.
But I was exposed to a computer lab or a library or loads and loads of people that I was able to discuss ideas with, peers and intellectual equals and some non-intellectual equals. But there's also significant wisdom to be found in experience, So if I were homeschooled, for instance, and didn't have that breadth of exposure, especially in the age we grew up where there wasn't Google or access to AI.
Sure.
And again, that's just my lens. I wouldn't say I'm done learning, but certainly my foundation has been well established for a while, and I do believe that predates the internet significantly. I'll read a section to close it off.
All right.
Everything begins in the mind. A wall begins with a blueprint. A mission begins with a plan. And a transformation begins with a clear picture of what it could be. This is not an idle daydream. It's a deliberate design. It is the mental work of building before you build. Athletes do this when they rehearse success in their heads. Military units do it when they walk through contingencies in a briefing room. Entrepreneurs do it when they imagine what does not yet exist and then step toward it. You must do the same. Take the leap. Step towards it. That was written by you.
Yeah.
Get out of here. Let me give you a question.
Yeah.
That you can close it off with this.
All right, cool.
This is my response to that passage. And I'm gonna try to get you to respond to it quickly.
Okay.
I'm gonna read through this quickly.
Yeah.
A mission begins with a plan. A plan begins with intent driven by a goal. A goal comes from vision, but where does vision come from? Who are you now? Who do you want to be? What do you have and don't have? And do others have what you already have, or do they have other things? What is Daniel's definition of success? All of the above are outcome-driven things, but you've also said to be careful in letting an outcome other than self-actualization be the motivation. What do you have to say?
So the definition for success, I don't know if I've fully defined what I want to say as success, but I can approximate it to...
What's a successful vision?
A successful vision is forming something, almost anything to aim towards, and continuing to iterate on it.
So starting it or starting the cultivation of a vision, just the step towards acknowledging you need one, is that the most important part?
Yes, absolutely. Because, and this is why vision wasn't necessarily the first. So in bringing vision in, I had it, I think, as number 3 in the framework. Then I moved it to number 1, and it was the last one to join the framework. The reason I had it at number 3 was because if it's the first step that you need, okay, let's create a use case or an avatar in an extreme. You have an addict, okay? An addict that's trying to recover needs to create a version of themselves that they need to aim towards, which is a version of themselves that that is not consuming whatever they're addicted to. So that's critical for them to do everything. But they also then have to begin with the courage and the willingness to do that, and maybe the humility to know that they're not the best version of themselves. And that's why I had that as number 3. So I'm still kind of torn in where it sits within the framework. I'm sold on it being critical, without question.
Sure.
Where it sits. And I think that's kind of by design. I think it can sit there or number 3. But that's something that I've been wrestling with for those reasons. So yes, it's picking something, aiming towards it, but before you pick something, you have to say that the version of myself that exists today is not the version that I want to settle with. And anyways, I don't know if that answers that fully for you.
Yeah, I mean,
and I threw more in there.
You've got me thinking that it could potentially all be pulled back to the will to power.
Elaborate.
We'll leave it for further reading.
Okay.
I can get into it, but it's Nietzsche.
Right. Beautiful.